Our final presenter is Sergei Chapnin, who is the Director of Communications at the Orthodox Christian Studies Center of Fordham University and Chief Editor of The Gifts, an almanac on contemporary Christian culture, as well as being Curator of exhibitions on contemporary Christian art. He graduated from Moscow State University's journalism faculty in 1992, and throughout the 90s he worked for leading independent newspapers in Moscow, and became one of the first journalists in Russia to cover religious issues professionally. In 2001, at the invitation of Patriarch Alexei, Chapnin was appointed executive editor of the Church Herald newspaper, and later executive editor of the Journal of the Moscow Patriarchate, and deputy chief editor of the Moscow Patriarchate Publishing House, as well as being senior lecturer at St. Tikhon Orthodox Humanitarian University's Faculty of Theology. To describe the religiosity of contemporary Russian society, he introduced the concept of post-Soviet civil religion. In December 2015, after his lecture at Carnegie Center in Moscow, where he made a prognosis that a war in Ukraine would be given a religious justification, and this is his most famous claim to fame, I think, he was fired from all his positions, personally by Patriarch Kirill. Mr. Chapnin is the author of numerous articles and commentary in national and international media. He's the author of the books The Church in Post-Soviet Russia, Revival, Quality of Faith in Dialogue with the Society, and The Church Revival, a Summary, both in Russian. And his talk is entitled A Pitfall for the Artist Liturgical as His Father.
Yes, thank you, Father, for this extended presentation. Because the conference was well planned and everything was according to the program, I decided that I will change the subject and I will use the opportunity to be the last speaker. So that will be, in a way, a conclusion from a personal perspective of what we heard for this 3 wonderful days we spent together. So I decided to put the question in a little bit provocative way. We were speaking about the shape of the sacred, basically in a peaceful manner, trying to focus on what is our positive and on the inspirations we have from contemporary architecture, from liturgical life, from our tradition. But I think we have to be, in a way, more realistic. The war is going on in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, in Syria, and Ethiopia. Orthodox Christians are taking part in all these conflicts. As far as I know, in Ethiopia, during the last 3 years, more than 500,000 was killed, not just military, but also civilians. In Ukraine, we don't know the numbers, but I guess it's now from both sides are killed and injured more than 200,000. What's the role of the church, and what's the role of the architecture, or the kind of the visual program that the church presents, works out to support this rather clear justification of war. So let me share a few ideas with you. So, but first, actually, I will say a few words about the idea, my main point from the presentation that was in the program. So I think that when we're speaking about the new approach in church architecture, I think the only source of this approach is reconsidering what the liturgical space is. And for centuries, I would say the basic idea of the church is that the church is a house of God. When we are keeping this tradition, no radical changes could appear. We'll be somehow locked within the same concept of the church, say, late antiquity type, and that's the easiest way, just to follow this structure. And Father Alexis Vinogradov was very strong in saying that, well, we have this division between the altar and the narthex, and we have to somehow to overcome it. But now we see that for decades, since at least 1970s, nothing serious happens. I mean, we have these tentative ideas. Well, of course, the iconostasis, well, we could have iconostasis kind of 7 rows, the classical Russian iconostasis, which kind of totally separates the altar, the clergy from the faithful, or we can use the kind of 1 row iconostasis, like Nicholas Church yesterday, for example. We saw, but still, even 1 row iconostasis still serves or could serve the same function, separate the clergy from the faithful. I think this is because we stick to the idea that the church is the house of God. The only radical shift in the church architecture that I can see and noticed is, and that's in the Catholic Church, and it is connected with this movement of liturgical revival of 1930s, 1940s. When they introduced, and I think that was before the Vatican II, when they introduced the idea that this is not just the house of God, but this is the place where community gathers together. And sounds quite simple, but that gives kind of totally different perspective. That's the reason why they managed to move the altar into the church, and the congregation could kind of could be around the altar. And that's actually exactly what we have, or this kind of initial idea, what we have in every church. In the we see it on the icon of the Last Supper above the royal doors. We see that the apostles are around the table, and yet for centuries we have this idea that around the table could be priests and maybe bishops, and the rest should sort of stay, well, at least a few steps far. So I think that the only radical change of the understanding of liturgical space is, in a way, well, it's quite radical, of course, is the total removal of the iconostasis. We have, I would say, the only one in Russia, a clear example of it, and that's the crypt of the church in St. Petersburg in Fyodorovsky Cathedral, the Cathedral of the Fyodorovskaya Mother of God, and that's the work of Archimandrite Zenon. So we see there are actually that's the altar, and in fact there is only one fresco of the last supper of the Eucharist actually are on the eastern wall, and we see just two images are Christ and Mother of God, and that's it. And that's quite demanding. I mean, that demands the whole change of the kind of the tradition that parishioners, priests, and even bishops get used to. I was in this church a few weeks after its consecration, and it so happened that I was together with the Record Bishop from Germany for Sunday liturgy. And when the rector of the church asked the bishop whether he will preside, whether he will celebrate the liturgy, on the phone, bishop said yes. But when he got into the church, he was shocked. Really, honestly, and he said that he was kind of impression, and his open, I'm shocked. Behind these words was the idea, I don't know how to celebrate liturgy in this space. And he said, I'll just pray. And so he hid himself behind his columns. You see that there is a passage there. He was staying there, and actually that was a totally new experience for a bishop. And then he gave a sermon, and he said that, you know, in a way you're blessed addressing the congregation, but at the same time, it's a great responsibility for the whole community, sort of to celebrate liturgy in this space. And of course, the main thing that, from my perspective, is that when you remove iconostasis and place just this small fence between the narthex and the altar, is the discipline in the altar. This is something unimaginable, you know, because those who are in the altar, they are quite happy that they are hidden from the congregation. They do so many different things in many ways during the liturgy that when you remove the iconostasis, it seems that that could be considered non-pious at all. But anyway, I think that's just the idea, that's the observation. I don't know how we could move another step towards this direction, but, well, at least we have an example. My idea is that at least we have an example of this. And that's the closing slide. Now I'm going to the main part of the presentation that I decided to make. So the third line, that's the Russian Orthodox Church in number. In 1988, there were only roughly 7,000 churches in the Soviet Union. By the year 2019, are almost 40,000. And many of these churches were built during these 30 years. 1/3 is in Ukraine, so if we now count Russian church separately from Ukrainian church separately from Russian, then you have to, that's 38,000 minus 12,000 churches. But we don't hear anything kind of substantial. That's something unique in modern world when during 30 years the church managed to build, consecrate, and form communities that, you know, almost 30,000 new communities, 30,000 new buildings, more than 30,000 new priests. This is, in terms of quantities, well, even I was a personal witness of all this, but I can't, you know, I can't comprehend this. Now, of course, there are wonderful examples, and I hope you saw the pictures, the boards that we put yesterday are in the other hall. But also we can say that, for example, this is a mobile church, mobile chapel for Russian military. And they did a lot of that. And it's kind of, it's ugly. I mean, it's not just kind of something practical or beautiful, it's just terrible. Then are the kind of this one step from this ugly churches is that our Russian priests could easily bless, I would say, almost everything, including missiles. And that's the result. I think this is the iconic image of what are, that's the result of religious revival in the post-Soviet space. This is Church of Saint Tatiana in Mariupol, destroyed a year ago. So when we're speaking about sacred space, I think my question is how we will include, and we must do that. We must include this image, these destroyed churches, and altogether, I guess, are there approximately a little bit less than 500 destroyed churches in Ukraine. 500. And you can add churches destroyed in Syria, and that's also another dimension that shapes, in a way, the sacred. How, I have questions, I don't have answers. So how we're going to deal with that? And maybe for the next, decades, the main idea will be not just build new churches, but do as much as we can to restore the churches that were destroyed during the war, and do something, at least do something that will not repeat. And that's not only just a program for peacemakers, for governments. This is also a program for us, for the faithful, for our artists, for the architects, for the theologians. We should be involved. And we have to think how we could be involved in that. The visual program is the kind of the dark dimension of our religious revival, the dark dimension of the contemporary liturgical art is there. So I will say a few words about the major construction site and major event in church architecture during the last few years in Russia. This is the main military cathedral in Moscow suburbs. It's something really very special. So that's its original color. So it's green and it's kind of imitation of the Art Deco style, and that's the only Art Deco church built in the post-Soviet space. And that's, you see, so this is not just the church in the middle of nowhere. This is a huge park, and around you see that's the museum of the Second World War. You see all these buildings around with the cathedral in the center. And this is not also a kind of computer graphics. This cathedral has a very complicated computer lighting system. They could do literally everything with lighting. So that's the other thing. And that's also, this is not computer, that's real photographs. So that they can do anything from the outside. And now is the Minister of Defense of Russia with this other war criminals are at the consecration of the cathedral. Now you see how this cathedral is included in this kind of military cult in Russia. And also there is a kind of sophisticated symbolic language in this cathedral. You see different numbers, like the height of the bell tower is 75 meters. What does that mean? This is not the idea that Christ has not 70 but 75 apostles. No, that marks the kind of anniversary of the victory in the Second World War when the cathedral was consecrated. Then you have kind of 19 meters, 45 centimeters diameter of the drum of the cathedral. What is that? That's the year when the Second World War ended, 1945. And a lot of, that's the whole list of this kind of symbolism, which has nothing to do with the tradition or the church or theology. That's the most interesting kind of thing to say. So, another one of the diameter of the drums is kind of 22 meters or 43 centimeters, and that's you can't imagine what's that. That's the time, that's Germany capitulated on the time when Germans signed the capitulation. That was 10 p.m. In the evening, sort of the European time, 43 minutes. And the other kind of, I think, blatant violation of tradition in this church is the military orders on the roof of the cathedral. You know that generally speaking, when we're going from the floor to the ceiling, we are going from earth to heaven. So that is why we have Christ at the highest point of the church. And the roof is usually, the higher places, is already the bridge between the earth and heaven. So, and we all know well that we can't take to heaven our earthly awards. But in this iconographic program, it's not just suggested. Well, it's presented as a right thing, and it's even because this is there were the different orders, not of the Russian Empire, of the Soviet Union, and we have even on the ceiling, on the way to heaven, the kingdom, we have also the symbols of Bolshevik symbols. But the most striking thing is the mosaics in the main space of the cathedral. You see Russian military, that's during the Second World War. You have the kind of Russian Soviet banners, and you see the saint above. So what is very special about this type of pictures? Of course, you can't call them icons. Saints are not there, but it's okay. Of course, we can depict even soldiers within the church. But the idea is that those who are alive and those who are dead and those who are glorified and all with Christ, they are praying all together to Christ. And we can see that these guys, they're not praying. They're not intended to pray. They even don't know how to pray. But they are ready to show their weapons. They are ready to fight. They are ready to shoot. They are ready to kill. And these images are all over the cathedral. It's not just the only one. You can see more of them. And even, there was an idea to put Putin over there, but because of the scandal, he was replaced by the icon. And not just Putin, but also Stalin. So that later he was also replaced because of the scandal. That's I would say this is not a Christian church at all. This is a sacred, but this is definitely a sacred space. When I was there 3 years ago, and what I saw, they kind of, that was a kind of joke, I guess, but very important. And that was a very important sign for me. So when I was entering this cathedral, I saw a lady in his maybe 40s going out of the cathedral with tears in her eyes. It was a kind of catharsis for her. She met something, or she faced something very special. That's we have to keep that in mind. So even the temple of the god of war could be really impressive. So it cost a lot of money. They invested a lot of effort. They built this cathedral within less than 2 years. That's the clear manifestation of this civil religion that actually replaced the Christianity in Russia, which is, this cult is, of course, wrapped in Orthodox traditions, rituals, and whatever. So when we're saying about tradition, I think, this is my last point, I think we have to be very careful, because the tradition in our kind of contemporary culture, I think quite often is understood, even within the community of faithful, only as a shape. When we're saying the shape of the sacred, we think that we are making accent on the sacred. But I guess that many people are quite happy to make the stress on the shape. And I think this is our, in a way, duty to at least to show the balance between the shape and the content. How we realize, how we feel, how we live this sacredness, or I would rather say holiness, if we're speaking about personal perspective. So these are my questions, and I think we really have to be very accurate and precise, addressing these problems in our work, in our pastoral work, in our work as architects, artists, members of the church, because that's a sign of deep crisis of the church in contemporary world. And somehow we are responsible for this. Thank you.